Hi, and welcome to English lesson number 33 for Thursday, Friday on the week of January the 4th. Today, this lesson will be a little bit of a longer lesson in class with a little more content than on Monday and Tuesday. We're going to be looking at the rubric for your final essay for this semester for the interview essay in our writing lesson. In our literature lesson, we're going to be viewing Act 2, Scene 1 of A Raisin in the Sun. And for our informational lesson, we're going to be reading the scene from The Wall Between where the Wade's family had their house bombed, kind of in connection with the scene we're going to be viewing in literature. For your choice voice recording today, these are the 10 prompts. Choose whichever prompt you are most interested in responding to and record your voice response and post that in the choice and voice response assignment in Google Classroom. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to talk about for the prompt that you're most interested in talking about. Our upcoming assignment for this Saturday is Act 2, Scene 1 questions, which is in Google Classroom. And again, all makeup work for semester number 1 is due next Friday on January the 15th. That is the end of the semester, and we won't be able to take work after that because we will be moving on into the second semester. Here are our learning targets for today. For writing, we're going to take a moment to review the 4 parts of the rubric for essay number 2, and this means you can finish your final draft for essay number 2 before next Friday when the semester ends. For literature, we're going to watch Act 2, Scene 1 of A Raisin in the Sun and complete a set of questions on that scene, which will allow us to explore the character development, setting, and authorial choices that are being made in that scene. And then for our informational lesson, we're going to learn about the events the night of the bombing of the Wade family in 1954 in Louisville through the eyes of Anne Braden in her book, The Wall Between. And this means we can understand the context of A Raisin in the Sun, as well as a little bit more of the history of Louisville through the eyes of a modern-day abolitionist. Here's our week structure. There's a lesson on Mondays and Tuesdays. There is office hours on Wednesdays from 12 to 2 p.m. And then there's another lesson on Thursdays and Fridays. For voice and choice today is a choice day. So for this assignment, it is an ungraded assignment. Please choose one of the 10 prompts that most aligns to your interests and record your voice responding to that prompt. Again, these are the 10 prompts for artist or designer. What isn't art is your prompt. For poetry or language, what can't be captured in language. For innovation, design, or trades, why do some businesses fail? Or why are dishwasher repairs up this year? For the journalist, what is fake news? For the fittest, how will we get sports back in 2021? For a student interested in teaching or psychology, how will education change after we go back in person? For someone who's interested in game design, what does the future of VR look like? If you're into music or sound, how can Spotify do a better job of paying artists? If you're pursuing a career in the military, when is a war a just war? And if you're interested in becoming an author or in going into editing and writing, what books or stories have you read or played recently, and what do you think about them? So please respond to one of those in that assignment. All right, so for our writing learning target today, we're going to be reviewing the rubric for essay number 2. And the goal of this review is to kind of get us a little bit more familiar with how to write that essay in a way that will get you the maximum amount of points on the rubric and get that completed. The first part of the rubric is purpose and focus. Your essay must establish and maintain focus on the audience and purpose. It needs to engage the audience by providing relevant background information. In this case, you're talking about a college or a career that you're interested in pursuing. So that college or career, you should go into a little bit of detail about why you're interested in pursuing that in your intro. That's a really good way to start with a strong purpose and focus. If you did the outline assignment for this, then you probably have a really good purpose and focus already in your rough draft because your outline allows you to plan ahead how you're going to stay on target for your topic the entire way through. For idea development, your essay should consistently develop ideas with depth and complexity to clarify the topic. So you should be using effective examples, details, facts, explanations, and descriptions. I'll add quotes to that for this one because this is an interview essay or a research essay if you were unable to do an interview. And you can use a variety of techniques or approaches. If you did the outline again for this assignment, for this essay, you've already planned a few of the quotes into your essay, which will increase your score on idea development right away. The way to lose points on idea development is if you don't have any quotes or support for your claims, or if you just say which college or career you're interested in, talk about why you want to do it, but then don't have any supports for why you would like to do it. For structure, again, if you did the outline, then you already have a very clear 5-paragraph structure with an introductory paragraph, a thesis, 3 support paragraphs, and a conclusion. If you didn't do the outline, then you're in danger of not getting a 3 or a 4 on structure, simply because it's very easy to get off topic or to kind of meander and lose focus as you're writing your essay. I know from personal experience, I lost points for structure a lot when I was in high school because I thought that I didn't need to do structure because I was such a hot shot when it came to writing. So I would always lose points for structure because I didn't plan. I highly recommend planning. For language and conventions, for grammar, if you did a rough draft, I give you feedback on grammar that involved me going through and editing as would an editor for a publication. And you can accept or reject those edits and make those changes prior to turning in your final draft so that you'll get a 3 or a 4. You'll at minimum get a 3 if I've gone through and done that for you. I may find enough more problems between rough draft and your final draft to knock you off a 4, but for the most part you'll be in a 3 or 4 range because I've already gone through your rough draft and found or pointed out to you any grammatical issues, which is part of why it's so important to turn in a rough draft. All right. Those are the 4 parts of the rubric that you're being graded on for your essays. Those aren't going to change a lot as we go into semester number 2. So if you're sticking around for semester 2 of this course, the language in that rubric is going to be pretty familiar by the end of the year. And again, Act 2, Scene 1 questions are the only thing that is due this week. All makeup work for semester 1 is due by the end of the week next week on the 15th. All right, our literature learning target today is that we're going to watch Act 2, Scene 1 of A Raisin in the Sun and complete a set of questions. This is a very short set of questions, even though it's not a super short scene. The scene itself is 30 minutes long, so we'll go ahead and get into that now. It's important to remember and seat ourselves in this poem by Langston Hughes before we get going in the scene and before we get going in the excerpt from Anne Braden's The Wall Between today as well. So let's read through the poem Harlem by Langston Hughes one more time as a framing device before we get into this scene. Langston Hughes asks, what happens to a dream deferred or put off? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore, and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over, like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags, like a heavy load. And then he puts in italics, or does it explode? This is a really important framing tool for what we're about to view in A Raisin in the Sun, as well as what we're about to read together in Anne Braden's text. All right, at this point in the class, the live class, I would start the film. On this, we're just going to keep moving forward. The link to this assignment is in Google Classroom. You can also view the entire film on YouTube through a link on Google Classroom. It's the Danny Glover version. It's really good. This one was posted at the beginning of the week. It is due January 9th. It is worth 40 points in the grade book, 20 points half credit undone. Make sure that you complete the Google form before you hit submit, but it is, again, a shorter one. It's a shorter assignment, even though the scene itself is not particularly short. And that is due this Saturday on the 9th. All right, so for our informational lesson today, we're going to learn about the events the night of the bombing of the Wade family in 1954 through the eyes of Anne Braden via her book, The Wall Between. This means we can understand the context of A Raisin in the Sun, as well as the history of Louisville through the eyes of a modern-day abolitionist. So this is kind of doing 2 things for us. We're talking more about the context of The Raisin in the Sun, and we're learning a little bit more about the history of our city. If you drive around Louisville, you'll see these signs all over the place. This one in particular is about what we're about to read about. And it says, Louisville suburbs were racially segregated when African Americans Andrew and Charlotte Wade moved to Roane Court on May 15, 1954, 2 days before the Supreme Court condemned school segregation. Neighbors burned across and shot out windows, and the Wades endured harassment until June 27, when the house was dynamited. So what we're about to read is the account of Anne Braden of that June 27 night. I could not find the first-person account of the Wades, though I did find the obituary for Charlotte Wade, who passed in January last year in 2020. So you can actually, if you Google Charlotte Wade, you can not only read her obituary, but you can actually see the video that they made for her funeral and kind of see how young and really your age her children and grandchildren are. I was awakened by the ringing of the telephone. I don't know how long it had been ringing when it finally roused me. I stumbled into the living room to answer. Anne. I recognized Andrew's voice, and the instant that he hesitated before saying anything else, I wondered what time it was that he was calling in the middle of the night. We're all right, he continued. It is strange how fast the mind can function at a time like this. He spoke steadily, but I recall that I had time to speculate that perhaps he was about to tell me that everything was all right on the loan from the insurance company. In my state of semi-sleep, it did not occur to me to wonder why he would have been calling so late about it, where he would have gotten such information on Saturday night since I had last talked with him. But they just blew the house up. Suddenly I was wide awake. When? What happened? Are you hurt? Just about 20 minutes ago. Nobody is hurt, or just a little shaken up. His voice was steady and controlled. But Rosemary, I asked. That's Andrew's daughter. Her bedroom's torn up, but she isn't here. We took her to Mother's so she could go to Sunday school in the morning, he replied. That's all I recall about the conversation, except that he also told me the house was half destroyed, all one side of it blown to bits. I told him Carl was still at work, but that he could probably drive out to Roane Court when he got home. No, I think you better stay there, Andrew answered. They might try something at your house tonight. You better look around. I agreed and hung up. I went to look at the clock. It was not quite 1 o'clock. I checked the children's bed to make sure they were sleeping soundly. Then I took my little pistol from its place on the bookcase and a flashlight and went outside. The street light 2 doors down from our house, which usually cast the light of day on our front lawn, which had been on when I went to bed, was broken out. I walked around the house with my flashlight and gun. Everything looked normal. I came back and sat on the front step with my gun until Carl came home, and I could tell him what happened. We sat up the rest of the night, but everything was quiet. It was not until the next day that I heard the details of what had happened at Roane Court. I heard from the Wades and from the others who were at the house. They had to recount the events many times subsequently, before the grand jury and criminal and civil courts of law. The story never varied in the telling. On Saturday morning, Charlotte and Rosemary had left the house about 8 o'clock to ride into town with Andrew as he went to work. The police day guard was, of course, no longer there. Vernon Brown had left the afternoon before to go to his night job, and had told the Wades he'd be leaving directly from work to drive to Wisconsin for a family reunion, and would be gone over the weekend. So on that Saturday morning, for the first time since the Wade, Andrew's father stayed only briefly. After that, the 2 women and little girl were there alone during the afternoon. About 7 p.m., Andrew came home from work, bringing 2 Negro friends, Tellis Wicker and Melvin Edwards, who were to serve as guards for the night. Andrew, feeling perhaps the same relaxation of tension that Carl and I had felt that day, and being relieved about the imminent solution of the mortgage problem, suggested that he and his wife and daughter and his wife's friend take a picnic over to the Indiana side of the Ohio River and spend the evening. It was to be the Wades' first night out for recreation since they moved to Roane Court. Wicker and Edwards said they did not mind watching the house alone. The Wades stayed in Indiana until late in the evening. They returned to Louisville, took Charlotte's friend home, and dropped Rosemary off at the home of Andrew's parents, as they often did on Saturday night. They got back to Roane Court shortly after midnight. Andrew recalls that it struck him as a little strange to observe, as they drove into the court, that every house in the neighborhood was dark. This was not usual for midnight on a Saturday night. As they passed the Roane's house, he saw the policeman on duty sitting in a chair in the round driveway, the spot where the police guards usually stayed. He apparently had no police car with him, and so, of course, no radio set. While the Wades pulled into the driveway, Wicker was sitting on a small side porch that opens with the kitchen to the house. Edwards was asleep on the couch in the living room. Andrew went into the house to get some soft drinks in the refrigerator and went back outside to talk to Charlotte and Wicker. He asked Wicker if everything had been quiet. Wicker said it had been quiet, but there had been an odd flashing of light just a few minutes before. First, he said, a light flashed from the roan yard near where the policeman was sitting, like someone flashing a flashlight, and he thought it appeared to be a woman holding it. Then a little later, another light had flashed. This came from the barn behind the Wade's house, directly across Roan Court from the spot where the first light flashed, in the Roan yard. Then Wicker had seen the third light. This one was out in the field on the opposite side of the Wade house, the side opposite the one in view of the policeman's position in the chair. A person in the position where the third light flashed could not have seen the flashing of the first light, because the Wade's house would have obstructed the view. He could, however, have seen the second light, and a person in the barn, or the second light, could have seen the first light in Roan's yard. The three together made a large triangular formation which enclosed the Wade's house. Wade and Wicker talked a while and speculated upon what the flashing lights could mean. They had not had long to wonder when a deafening crash tore the air and almost threw them off their feet. When they pulled themselves together, they realized the house had been blown up. Charlotte began shaking uncontrollably, and Andrew tried to calm her before doing anything else. The worst of the explosion had been on the side of the house opposite where they were sitting. Apparently, dynamite had been placed in the air vent where the grating was broken out 6 weeks before when the window was smashed. This is the side where the 2 bedrooms and bathroom were. These rooms were virtually destroyed. Huge holes were blown in the floor, and some of the flooring boards crashed into the ceiling and the rest of the house. Windows were broken, and floors were buckled by the impact. Edwards, who had still been asleep on the couch, emerged from the house dazed and stunned, but unhurt. The policeman ran in from across the street and started calling on the telephone, which for some reason was still in operation. Soon the premises were crowded with police. One of the most interesting aspects of that night came out of the testimony before the grand jury of the officer, William E. Blevins, who had been on duty in the Roan's yard. A juror asked, "At the time of this explosion, did any of the white neighbors in the neighborhood come around to see what happened to this house?" He said, "Not while I was there, they did not." The juror says, "Was the explosion very loud?" He said, it was loud where I was at." The juror asked, is there white people living on either side of the house?" And he said, "Yes." And then the juror asked, "None of these people were disturbed at that time?" And he said, "As far as I know, they weren't." Up until the night of June 26th, Andrew and Charlotte Wade had been struggling valiantly to make their house a home. Despite the burning cross, the shots on the door, the rock with its "in, get out," despite the streams of curiosity seekers riding by each day, despite the fact that their house is a public issue and they seem to be living in a goldfish bowl, despite the fact that the house is filled each night with the volunteer guards talking in the kitchen, exploring the refrigerator, or watching television in the living room, guards they wanted and welcomed even though they did make life somewhat inconvenient. Despite all these things, the Wades persistently tried to create some semblance of normal living. Charlotte hung the drapes for her living room windows. She shopped for rugs and debated with herself what color slipcovers to buy for her living room. She had dreamed of a home of her own for many years. Her greatest delight was in fixing it up the way she wanted it. She was expecting the new baby very soon, and she wanted everything perfect. She is not a person especially interested in causes. She had no desire to fight a crusade. She simply wanted a home, wanted to live in it in a normal way. On June 27th, all these dreams blew up with the house. Neither she nor Andrew ever felt the same about the house again. The possibility of a solution on the mortgage problem was blown to bits with the concrete and plaster of the house. And I just kind of want to keep the frame of Harlem, right? What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up, like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? All right, this is a shorter lesson. Again, the only thing that's due this week are the 7 or so questions for Act 2, Scene 1. All makeup work for Semester 1 is due by next Friday. Thanks for listening. I hope you all have a great afternoon. We hit these learning targets. The essay number 2 was past due, but that is a measure of your ability. Act 2, Scene 1 questions are aimed at answering the questions as you view the film, and our informational lesson today was just some context about Louisville and A Raisin in the Sun. Have a good one. Thanks.